Anthony. I'm with Francesca and Shane. We're the Future Proof podcast, and we thought what would be fun this time is to like kind of do a show and tell. So Shane's gonna kind of pull up his screen, and he's gonna show us how we kind of work on a daily basis with AI, and kind of show just how fantastic it is, and hopefully that will spark your guys' curiosity, and we're gonna just have fun doing it. So Shane, take it away.
Yeah, so first of all, is the screen viewable for you guys? Is the text big enough? Can you see what I'm seeing? I've got a spreadsheet on the left, and then I've got an instance of ChatGPT open on the right. I'm assuming you guys can see both.
Yep.
Yep. All good to
Okay,
me.
so yeah, as Anthony mentioned, we wanted to give folks just a glimpse into how we use AI in various parts of our day, which is increasingly becoming most or all of our days these days. And one of the areas in which we've really found that it's accelerated our work is in any sort of data analysis, data visualization, data cleaning, and in an increasingly data-driven world, this problem pretty much touches everyone who's a quote-unquote knowledge worker these days. So we thought it would be helpful just to walk through some high-level steps into how we do a lot of these tasks. And so what you're seeing on the left here is just a few, there's several different steps in an entire workflow to clean and organize and then eventually rank order a list of books in this case, but you can apply this workflow to pretty much any sort of database. You may not need to do something like come up with a rank ordered list. So just keep in mind, it's really the workflow, the way in which we're using some of these tools that's most relevant. You can easily apply a lot of these tactics to something totally different. So to go back to what I was saying earlier with the books, we're going to use this example of a list of raw data that we've got on several of the leading artificial intelligence books. And the goal of this exercise will be to take what is unstructured, unclean data, clean it, then we're going to categorize it, and then eventually, based on some of the data we've got here, and you can see we've got the published date, we've got ratings and reviews from Amazon and Goodreads, we've got whether or not the book was mentioned on any sort of bestseller list, and we're interested in cleaning this list, organizing it, like I said, into categories, and then eventually coming up with an algorithm that will help us rank order this list of books based on these metrics here, right? Now, if you were going to do this manually, especially if we're talking about a database that's got hundreds, or in some cases, like what we deal with very often, thousands or tens of thousands of rows, doing an exercise like this, if you're not a data scientist, if you're not a coder, can be very time consuming. And I started my career off as an investment banker, which means that you're spending hours and hours and hours, 12, 15, 18 hours a day sometimes in spreadsheets. And so one of the names of the game in that industry, I think even for a lot of, people who are just running businesses, maybe they're working in marketing, any way that you can cut down on the time doing repetitive tasks gives you a lot more time back in your day. So hopefully what we show you today can, help you on that journey. But that's really the high level goal. So the first thing I want to show you guys is how to use ChatGPT as a thought partner. Oftentimes you're in a spreadsheet, you don't really know the formula. You've got some idea how to do what you're trying to do, but you forgot the formula. I'm not going to get into something super complicated, but let's say you've got this list of books, and as you can see here, hopefully it's big enough to read, but small enough to really get an overall sense of the data. In this data set, there's a bunch of different duplicates that I've intentionally inserted into the spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do first is go to ChatGPT and ask it to help me come up with a formula that will conditionally format this spreadsheet to highlight all the different duplicates, just so I have a sense for what I need to remove. And I've got the formula over here. And by the way, I'm not going to go through the entire workflow where I show you how to write the prompt. I've got them all preloaded here, and I'll just walk you through the high-level steps. Okay, so I've got my prompt. I'm going to paste it into ChatGPT. And you'll notice that the prompt, even though I'm asking for a simple formula, is quite long. And so one of the things we wanted to touch on today is what makes for a good prompt, right? And this may be, obvious to a lot of folks, but we talk to a ton of people still, very smart people, and we found that they don't quite know how to really talk to these agents to get the results back. So one of the things you're noticing up here is that I'm providing some context. I'm telling ChatGPT, what is the project that I'm working on? What's the purpose of it? I'm telling it to think through the perspective of a role. I'm saying you're a master data scientist. You've got a lot of experience working in Google Sheets. And then finally, I ask for, I tell it what the task is. I want to come up with a formula for Google Sheets to identify duplicates. And I ask it to give me that result back in a specific format, which in this case is a code box, which will allow me to just take that formula, copy it. It's got some instructions in here telling you what to do. And essentially, I'm going to go over to format, conditional formatting. I'm going to select this custom formula option here, paste in my formula, and then hit done. And we'll see if it works. Forgot to highlight the column that I wanted. Try this one more time. There we go. So anything highlighted here green means it's a duplicate, right? So these are the rows we want to eliminate. Anthony, I think I saw you start to ask a question.
I was gonna say, so like the general theme here is like if you don't want to think about writing formulas, the AI can do it for you. You just got to ask the right question and then follow the instructions, and you're good to go. It's like
exactly. Like I said, I mean, if this could be a VLOOKUP formula, it could be a match offset, it could be anything you want. Oftentimes, people who work in spreadsheets a lot, they're searching around on Google, they're reading the documentation. This is just a much faster path to finding the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to people who use spreadsheets all the time, and they're just actually just either getting like lists from people, and then they're having to like go through it painstakingly like by hand. And it takes like 2 hours, but they get it done. And then they spend an hour watching a couple of YouTube videos to try to get one formula. I think our message here is like, don't do that. Like, get an account on ChatGPT and like ask it a question and just follow how we're doing it. And you're gonna get like, you're gonna just actually get so much more performance out of your spreadsheet work, and it's gonna get done faster. And then you can watch YouTube videos for fun rather than for work.
Okay, so the next step would be eliminating all those duplicates in our data set. And once again, I've got a prompt that I've already written. I'm going to go back to that same chat session, and I'm going to ask it this time to help me write a formula to programmatically remove all of those duplicates in our spreadsheet. And for this particular step, we're actually going to show you how to use what is called Google Apps Script, which even if you're a pro with spreadsheets, if you're not a developer, in a lot of cases, you probably never even heard of Google Apps Script, but it's an extension that allows you to essentially type in code and then have Google Sheets itself execute the command. So it doesn't involve any formulas to go through like we just did. It's really a more programmatic way to do what you're trying to do. And the thing is, prior to something like ChatGPT, you would never touch this if you didn't know how to program, right? So it's a pretty powerful way to start manipulating your data sets purely by knowing how to talk to ChatGPT. So I'm going to go back to our spreadsheet. And when I say Google Apps Script, you can access that through the extension toolbar. And you're going to look for this here, right? So I'm going to open Apps Script. And you can see it's a code editor, right? So I've already got the code in here, but I'm going to show you exactly what I do to get this code. So I'm going to go back to ChatGPT. I'm assuming you guys can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Sorry?
We can see it.
Okay, so I've loaded in my prompt. I say, now I'd like for you to help me write a Google Apps script that will scan the spreadsheet and then remove all the duplicate rows. I say, for example, right? So this is another key, right? So you're more likely to get back an accurate set of instructions or result if you provide some real context, right?
Why is grandmother
Yes,
dying?
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that in a second, right? So before I do though, like I provide an example of what I'm looking for, because you want to tell it what success looks like, right? The more context you can get to these agents, the better they perform. I also say the values closest to the bottom of my spreadsheet are the most recent, right? So if I'm removing duplicates, I want to remove the oldest, stalest data first, right? So think through, if you're going through any sort of workflow like this, really think through what you're trying to accomplish. Think through all the different constraints. Think through what is important to you. Provide that as context, because you might be surprised at just how powerful the results are and how specific you can really get. So you asked about the grandmother's dying wish, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people in the developer community talk about, little ways that you can hack ChatGPT or Claude or any of these agents simply by the incentives you give it. And one that I've heard floating around a lot recently is, if it's my grandmother passed away, it's her dying wish that you do a really good job on this, particular task. And they've actually, and this is purely anecdotal, they've actually said that providing these little, bribes essentially have resulted in better work. So another one that I've heard about is like, I'll give you $1,000 or I'll give you $1 if you get it right.
So
you can try your own thing, but the purpose is, experiment with different ways to talk to the agent and just see what kind of results you're getting back.
All right, let's nerd out there for a second. Because I think that's interesting. I mean, maybe Francesca could chime in, but the way I'm thinking that the reason why those might work, if you're an AI researcher, put an AI researcher hat on for a second. It's like you're trying to push this neural network into a place where reward is getting connected. So, and so like, I don't know, because like these like little like reward, like do this for me for this reason for $1 or my grandmother. It's clearly having an outcome that's actually working. So an AI researcher would have to actually think about like how are these neurons getting like weights for that? I mean, do you have any insight on that or any hypotheses?
I personally don't. This was the first time that I encountered specifically the phrasing of my grandmother's dying wish, but I think the incentive makes a lot of sense. And if I had to hypothesize, I guess thinking about how these models work, like these models are basically designed so that they can statistically predict the next thing. And so in this case, the model is like predicting the next word or like the next thing it wants to say. And I can imagine a situation in which, just the data that the model is trained on, which is, kind of human-based text, there are probably hidden incentive structures to the way, this data is sort of written. If you think of like a recipe, like there is always written in a recipe some kind of narrative, maybe an incentive where like this recipe is for sure going to get you like a second date. This recipe is going to be, a hit to celebrate Mother's Day, etc. And so like that incentive structure is kind of built into human interaction and human language. And so I can imagine that statistically the model is kind of learning that. The question I had though was separate. I think this is really cool. I'm going to be trying it out myself, trying to see what kinds of incentives are more effective, like monetary in the human world seems to be one of the most effective incentives. So I think that's super interesting. But my question was, obviously for the purposes of this demo, Shane, you're breaking up two distinct steps of identifying duplicates and then removing duplicates. But you can imagine that, a professional may want to skip to step 2 or may only want step 1. Is it important that you need step 1 identifying duplicates for this Google Apps script prompt to work, or
No,
can,
but
okay.
I think the real purpose of showing that first step is to get people in the habit of really using these agents as a thought partner more generally. In this context, we're talking about data analysis. But you could apply this to really any workflow. And I think it's probably a more salient point when you start thinking about just how complicated formulas and spreadsheets can
It
be.
is.
I mentioned index, offset. There's countless other formulas that people know about or they may know about, but they just forget the structure of them. And oftentimes when you're reading through a blog article or going to the documentation, it's just very time consuming. In this particular case, it's very simple, right? So you may not need it for something as simple as that. But, I myself didn't even, and I've spent, thousands of hours in spreadsheets over the course of my career. Sometimes even the simplest formulas, you're not aware that they
It
exist,
is.
right? So it's a more general point about, like I said, using these agents as a thought partner. And sometimes you may not have any idea that the type of formula you are looking for even exists. You don't know what you don't
Yeah,
know,
that's a good point.
right? So I often find that going to ChatGPT or Claude, like I said, and just saying, hey, here's the problem I'm confronting in my spreadsheet. Give me some solutions for how to get past this problem. And it's more often than not, it's very effective at doing that.
And to sort of clarify for our audience or listeners, when you create these prompts, I am assuming that it's, created with just one request in mind, that you would never combine requesting the code for identifying duplicates and the Google Apps script code in the same prompt, or is
Well,
that
okay, so
something you would do?
that's a really good question. So you'll notice that I the first prompt and the second prompt. So the first prompt having to do with the formula, the second prompt having to do with writing this code, I very intentionally put into the same chat window, right? And the reason why is because the more context that these agents have to work with, the more cogent and seamless their responses, right? That's why, for example, in the very first prompt, I gave context and I told it to think, through the perspective of a role. I gave it a task. I gave it an example of what type of output that I wanted. These are all very helpful things for the AI to understand because it's so generally capable, right? Like I could ask it to give me a poem, right? But you need to allow it to home in on a very specific subset of knowledge because it really does have a big impact on how accurate and effective the results are that come back.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good question, and I get it, and I feel like when I'm talking to folks that are like new to AI and just maybe they're just not like they're not computer programmers, they use applications like they use a web browser or they
Right.
they kind of just they're using a CRM because the company's chosen the CRM and they got to type their data in there, so they're almost like they're power users in different ways and they just use their applications to put data in. I feel like ChatGPT also could be like, I don't even know how to use it. And I think our message here is like, just think of it as the most friendly kind of person on your team that's non-judgmental. And you could ask it a million questions and it's never upset at you. And so Shane's typing in like really smart prompts, but you could also write really sloppy prompts and still, so you could do many times at this to arrive at your answer. You can just keep cutting and pasting into your Excel like formulas until you get what you want. And I think what Shane's just showing you, this is more like this is what's possible. And Shane's an expert, but you could be like you could be afraid of it and still get it to give you do favors for you. And that's the message. It's like AppScript. No one knew about AppScript. You were only doing that if you're an engineer because like you needed to actually like connect it to something like in your enterprise. But it's there. You can use it. it's not going to bite you, and ChatGPT doesn't care. So you just ask it questions, you know what I mean? And just paste it in there. It's not going to break anything. So that's the message. And it's like, you can become a power user overnight, and then your boss is like, wow, like, how'd you do that? And you're like, don't tell them. Just like learn this and become a power user. That's the message.
Yeah. The one final note on your initial question, of combining the prompts, in a single chat instance, like, and not to anthropomorphize this technology too much, but it's almost akin to, let's say you've got an intern that you are giving a project to, and you want them to execute a specific task in a specific way. You spend a lot of time just describing the project and what you want accomplished. Well, you're going to get a very different result if you go to just some random person on the street and you say, hey, give me this, right? Do this project for me. They don't have that context, right? So that's why it's really important when you're working on a very lengthy project or going through a series of steps and it's all related to some, general high-level goal. It's really helpful to continue to do that in the same chat, because all the instructions, all the steps you're taking are being remembered by the agent, right? So that means you don't have to continue to go back and explain, like, here's what I'm working on and here's what I want to accomplish. But to jump back to what we were talking about.
Yeah,
right?
let's go.
So the purpose of this step, like we said, is to remove those duplicates, and we're going to use Google Apps Script. I just pasted in the prompt asking it to write me the code in order to remove those duplicates. And so that is exactly what you're looking at here. So I'm going to take the code, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to go back to Google Apps Script, which again I accessed by going to extensions, and then this here. And all you're going to do is paste it in, right? So you delete whatever was there before, paste in your code, hit save, and then run, right? So down here will tell you that it started. I'm going to go back over to our database, and these duplicates should start
It's magic.
Okay, so see the number down here is ticking up. So it really is magic, right? Because like we said before, previously, you would have to know how to code, and the vast majority of people just don't have that skill. And if you didn't, you'd have to go through and do this in another way, which is just so time consuming, but we've just eliminated that entire process.
Yeah. I remember working with my customer success teams, and we have 60,000 customers, and they get reports, they get them in CSVs, and there's all this like work of like trying to, figure out dedupe, sort. Oftentimes I was asking customer success teams like, hey, get everything, and let's do a sentiment analysis. And like they're just like, oh man, like what is Anthony asking? And it's like, okay, we got to give that to it. We got to schedule a meeting. We got to schedule a meeting. That's like 6 people. We got to ask the data team to get that on the stack. Then the data team's got to get these CSVs, collate them, bring it all together, give them a report, review it. It's like tons of people, and yeah, that's the way most people operate, because like customer success teams are getting lots of data from customers, their behavior, and they're having to actually analyze it for their bosses. And it requires like all this like cross team, work. But if you add up all the meetings that establish this thing, like dedupe and like sentiment analysis, something, you might have spent $15,000 of people's time. We can now just almost say, do it yourself. Now,
yeah, and just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, asking someone to do it themselves is also kind of like, wow, that just made my job a lot harder. But it also is going to make you a lot more powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's like, I predict that a lot of people that adopt this strategy of learning how to use this, yeah, you're going to have to do the more work, but you're also going to become more powerful in your organization, and the boss is going to know that, right? Suddenly you don't have to have a meeting, a Zoom with like 9 people in it to get like the sentiment or, this data cleaned up so we can run reports. So these tools are going to make you a power user. And I think we're just trying to let you guys know it's possible. You might not want to do it, or you might want your colleague to do it for you, but it's possible.
Yeah, and just a few notes on this, right? So, the danger in doing a workflow like this when you don't know the underlying mechanism of how it works, or you don't know how to code, is that you can over rely on results that may be inaccurate. So I recommend a few things to really counteract that risk, and one of which is just in the prompt itself. Again, the more detail you can provide, the better. I often will tell it to error check its work when it's doing stuff like this. I also recommend just basic good practices, like making a copy of whatever you're working on before you start to do this, so you can go back and compare the results. And I think maybe the more important point is to not think that we're just limited to using these workflows for something as specific as removing duplicates, right? Like, even in the process of sanity checking your work, ChatGPT, things like AppScript can help there too, right? Think through, how you want it to verify, right? You could come up with an AppScript that says, okay, take the old data set and the new data set and compare them, right? So there are a number of different things that you can do to make sure that the results you're getting back are actually accurate and that you're using it safely. And then, finally, like I said, it doesn't have to be limited to just removing duplicates, right? There's a number of different things you can do. Like, oftentimes you're working with multiple different data sets, and maybe the schema, or in other words, the column names are different, or they're out of order, and you've got to combine all those different sheets. You can use this same exact workflow to do that. In other words, it's like, I've got these multiple different data sets. I need you to reorder the columns and then combine them, right? So it's capable of doing a lot. The broader point is just think through your goal, what you want to accomplish, and get in the habit of talking with these agents about how to solve that problem. Okay, so we did that next step, and what we're going to do after is to rewrite our descriptions, right? So I mentioned before that we've got a lot of raw data. All of this column here is the original description that was taken from Amazon, right? Well, let's say you want to display this information on a web page. You don't want to plagiarize. Maybe in some cases you've got, I inserted these emojis here just for the sake of example. But let's say you've got, Cyrillic characters or weird symbols or other just superfluous information in your original data, and you want to clean it all out, right? So we're going to use a slightly different approach to dealing with these. It will also involve ChatGPT, but more specifically, it'll involve a tool that I've come to rely on constantly, which is called GPT for Work. Are you guys seeing this screen on the right?
Yeah,
where it says GPT Work? Okay.
So this use case is about, like, if you have a lot of stuff described a certain way and you want to rewrite them all for like an A/B test, or you want new descriptions on your products or whatever. Like, this kind of use case will allow you to kind of quickly do that with AI. Is that the goal?
Yeah. So GPT for Work, what it really does is allow you to bring the power of these large language models directly into documents.
Got it.
Whether it's a Google Doc or a Google Spreadsheet in this case, or even Excel. And the team at GPT for Work has just done such a great job of allowing you to do this in such an easy way. So I definitely recommend people go check out gptforwork.com. We're going to use a product that's very specific to Google Sheets, but like I said, you can use this in Excel, Word documents as well. And it basically takes the form of a formula that brings in the power of many different models. And what we're going to use is Claude's model specifically. And the reason why is because in our experience, when it comes to dealing with writing text, and especially in being able to write and rewrite text in a way that feels very human, we tend to get a lot better results using Claude over GPT. The disclaimer there is you need to have access to a paid account really to get the best results, which we've talked about in previous, podcasts. We think it's more than worth the $20 you've got to pay per month in order to use these more powerful models. But enough with the preamble. We're going to go into the spreadsheet, and I'll show you exactly how we put something like this to work. So I've got our prompt saved, which is right here.
So if GPT for Work is also a paid app as well, right? So if you want to kind of get this superpower, you get that app, and you can kind of also use if you have a AI account with OpenAI or Anthropic, you can use either one of those to kind of do the AI work that you're about to show, correct?
Yes. So you are going to write a formula, which you see up here on the screen, and they always start with GPT, right? So it's equals GPT, and then you've got your prompt. And you can see it's quite long because here again, I'm providing some context to the LLM, so it knows what I'm working on, and it knows what the goal is. And I won't read through all of this, but what it boils down to is I'm saying that I want you to look at the content that's in this cell here, the original script content,
column D,
and I want you to rewrite it, right? And I'm telling it very specific things, like I want you to check for grammatical errors, but I don't want you to fix spelling of proper nouns, names, well-known acronyms like SEO. Again, give it examples. Tell it what the goal is. Tell it what format you want it back in, and the length of the format. So that's why I specify I want the description to be between 100 and 200 characters.
Yep.
Now, these agents are notoriously bad at doing things like math, right? So just because you tell it you want it a certain length, very rarely does it mean that you're actually going to get it back. So if you want,
it doesn't even understand. Yeah,
it doesn't, but it will at least try to approximate that result. So if you want a description that's 500 characters, tell it 200, because it's just bad at doing that.
Yeah, this goes back to what Francesca was saying, was these things are amazing, these LLMs are amazing, these AIs are amazing, but they are amazing at guessing really accurate, but they're not super intelligent where they're like, you said 100, so I'm going to calculate 100 as I'm trying to return stuff. It's not doing that, right, Francesca?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because it seems like almost unintuitive that a computer would be bad at math, but this specific computer is, because of that reason, where what it is doing is just predicting what it can infer from the data that it's been trained on will be the correct thing to say next. And so there is like no built-in, counter or any kind of word count tool that we are very familiar with in other computers in this specific model. But
Yeah,
right.
it's not like using a handheld calculator. It's really just it's looking at the description, and it's trying to predict, based on all the text that came before, what is the most likely word that should come next. So it's just a totally different thought process.
But what I wanted to say about what Shayna's attempting to do with this model is still really cool, particularly in the context that we've been talking about of, maybe someone who doesn't have the background in computer science or the background in data science. For most of my computer science schooling and professional life, I was working with language in the field of natural language processing. And this was the stuff that, we had to kind of do by hand. We had to make sure that we, were removing duplicate words. We were using spell checker. We were removing stop words, like the words with no meaning. And that would take 20 lines of code or 30 lines it would take a lot of, code and a lot of thought. And it's just really cool now to see that kind of streamlined into what Shane is, showing. for someone who is not maybe getting their hands dirty with the code, but to still get the same or similar result. So I think that's just really cool.
Yeah, this is it's just such an enormous time saver. And I mean, so if you wanted to do this same thing and you weren't working within Google Sheet directly in the source of your work, directly in the spreadsheet, you can imagine taking every description, copying them individually, and then going to ChatGPT or Claude and asking it to rewrite it. But even that is just enormously time consuming.
Well, I'll give you something right now. I think there's probably 10 million people today in a spreadsheet looking at a title of a product and then having to think about how to write a better title for the product in another spreadsheet, pasting it, and then sending it to the next group to like actually run the ad in LinkedIn or something like that. Right now that's happening.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's see that you clean this stuff up and let the magic happen.
Let's see it in action. But it's still a good enough size for you guys to see, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I do that, I'm just a quick note on how you actually enable it, right? So as Anthony mentioned, this is a paid service. I find it's more than worth the cost. But in order to enable it, you are going to need an API key for the models you're using. And I'll show you what I mean in a second here. But in order to make this
let's see the magic first.
In order to make this work in your spreadsheet, once you've installed it, you access it through the extensions toolbar, and then you enable it here, right? So I've already done that. At least I think I have. I'm going to paste in the formula. And once again, I've got the prompt, and then I'm going to reference this cell here. Hit enter, and hopefully it'll work. It looks like it is. And I'll walk through the rest of the elements that you saw in that formula in a second, but there you go.
Magic. Look at that.
Right, so it just rewrote the description according to the prompt that I wrote. And the magic is, again, it's in a spreadsheet, right? So I don't have to keep writing that over and over and over again. So I'm just going to drag that formula
can you make
down.
that bigger for us and just let's look at the how well it did.
Oh, you mean the
outcome,
first result?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So you can see the original description was quite lengthy, right? We wanted to rewrite it and then condense it down. And I think from what you can see, it's done a decent job. You can play with your prompts. If you're going to use this, play with the prompts to get what you're looking for. And one of the main messages we always talk about is don't just take the output as a given. Like, it really needs a human touch sometimes.
So it looked like it got the name right. It got his name right, his book title right. It kind of looked like it provided like a nice little synopsis. Like it gave the column D looked like a very long one, and hey, like we got a very short one.
Yeah,
which is great.
Exactly.
It's not talking about lollipops and ice cream. It's talking about his book. So it's worthy, right?
It's pretty good.
Yep.
Okay, so now, I mean, again, the magic is really in just doing this at scale, right? So I'm going to drag the formula down, and it's going to do all of that really more or less instantaneously.
Let's see, that looks like fun. So
the one note that I have here is you are asking the model to bear more and more of a computational load the more of these formulas you try to execute at once. And in my experience and having talked to the team at GPT for Work, it just seems like the maximum number of rows that you want to do this for at any given time is probably in the hundreds. For me, it's typically meant, somewhere around 300.
Yeah. And
if you're working with a spreadsheet that's got thousands and thousands of rows, don't just do it all in one go. Not just because it takes a while, but because you want to give yourself an opportunity to actually see what the results are. Do it on a few first. See if you like the results. If you don't, tweak the prompt a little bit, and then start working in batches.
and I wanted to point out, just because kind of the unconscious process that we went through earlier when Anthony asked to see the outcome of the first one was really using, the human eye test or the eye test of the user, so you, and you were able to see, like, okay, it got the name right, as Anthony said, it got the title right, did it look kind of on the right topic? Like, you are a hurdle that, can always stop the AI and redirect it if it does get it wrong. And I guess a warning, in addition to just the computational load of doing things at scale, is that it is also a computational load for yourself to be that sort of human eye test. And it does get things wrong, or these LLMs are notoriously inconsistent. Like, I can kind of see here that formatting is something that historically ChatGPT and all the other LLMs have been very, have struggled with. And you can see here, like, when they're listing the output of, when the output is listing the title of the book, some are in quotation marks, some aren't in quotation marks. And so definitely think about sort of the trade-offs in terms of not just the computational load, but also what you as a user is capable of in correcting for the LLM. And if that is,
That's a really good point. And so one of my recommendations there, again, it's all in the prompt, right? Like you'll never, I think it's not smart to just eliminate yourself from that quality control process, but there are ways that there are ways that you can combat, just getting back poor results. And a lot of it is in the prompt, right? So, I could have just as easily included the name and the title in the prompt itself, right? So for example, I could say B2 to D2, and I could point out in the prompt, I want you to start every description with the name of the author and then the book title in quotes in your response. So be specific, experiment with the prompts, look at how the initial results are coming back. And once you're satisfied with those, then, use it on the rest of your spreadsheet.
Yeah, I gotta note what Francesca was saying was if you're working in a spreadsheet and having to do all this work, you're having to kind of do a bunch of just like mechanical work to kind of like rewrite stuff or move stuff around. And if you're going to use the power of using AI is a kind of what we want AI to do. Its best is like get that drudgery work out of our way, and then let us look at 100 rewrites of something, and allow me as a user the hour to look at the writing rather than spending an hour like moving stuff around in Excel and then being exhausted at like the creative part. Let's the goal here is like, great, I just did 100 rewrites. Now let me go into all of them, which took 45 seconds. Now let me go into there and go look at spot check each of them, which was Francesca saying. And that's where we're going to beat the AIs all the time in adding that the most important thing is a human touch. Can we change it around just a little bit? Or is it just good enough? Well, that's the power of getting AI to do hard work for us so we can do work that only humans can do.
Yeah. So here I have, one observation on that is, really related to the way in which you're communicating with these models. And, we talk a lot internally about the difference between single shot and multi-shot, which really gets at whether you are single shot would be just like, here's the task, give it back to me. I'm taking it as a given. I'm done. Right. Like multi-shot is more like you got to keep prodding it, keep asking it follow-up questions, keep testing it. And I think that same logic really applies here. Right. So if I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but if the output of this description was just, a list of comma separated words, for example, and you're in that process now of going back to make sure that you're only getting back the words you want, you could run a separate prompt on all that list within the sheet saying, hey, I want you to check of all this output from the first prompt, whether I'm getting the results back that I want. right? So keep that multi-prompt or that multi-shot mentality in mind.
Yeah.
Just because you're done with the task at hand doesn't mean you're necessarily done. Think of other ways that you can use these models to even check the work of the first workflow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm always, when I'm working with folks, I'm always saying like never ask one question. Like ask it, like ask it again and again. So like we could run that, we could create a new column called column, F, and say, hey, rewrite the rewrite, or challenge the rewrite.
Yeah,
like it's
exactly
just a
right.
bunch of ways of like, it's getting over the hump of like, this is not scary, this is just great. And never ask one question. Like ask 10 questions, ask it to do it 10 times. It's for you. So just you can kind of what I always call is cajoling.
This reminds me of when I would teach an introductory to AI class. One of the first questions after sort of presenting maybe the first model to the class is, what is the AI good at? And then, the counterpart being like, what is the human good at? And I think, Shane, you perfectly demonstrated what the AI is good at. The AI is good at speed, and the AI is good at scale, which means you can get a lot of things done quickly, but that also means you need to do things a lot of times for the AI to get it right. Whereas, a human, maybe the human does the task once and then can do that task right, many times after. And so it's that balancing act of like, the AI gives you the advantage in speed and scale, but knowing that there is this drawback of having to maybe iterate over this process multiple times, like Shane and Anthony recommended. And so you, as the human, you can read a description once. Like I scanned over 2 rows and could immediately see like the difference. And it might take the AI, 5 tries to do that. And so just really knowing that general, like, what is the AI going to help me with? What am I going to bring to the AI's output to make it perfect for my role? Like that kind of balancing act, if you master that, you can pretty much combine the plethora of AI tools out there to make sure you're doing your job really, really well.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
That is really great.
Well, let me just, so there are some things that we glossed over here. And namely that is the structure of these prompts. We mentioned that the first part of this formula is the prompt itself and what you want the agent to accomplish. But then there are some other parameters in here that are important, right? So after the prompt, I reference the cell that I want it to rewrite. There's a blank comma here that this really refers to what is called temperature. And I won't go into all the specific settings for that, but what that really means is how creative do you want the model to be with its response?
Let's see how creative you can get.
The default is, and Francesca, I know you've got to run. I'm really glad that you were able to join for the first part of this.
Me too.
Feel free to drop off.
Yeah, no, thank you for the demo. Shane, you've taught me a lot of things, particularly that I need to incentivize my LLMs better. But thank you. And this demo has been so cool and so useful. And from the perspective of just, someone getting set up, I think my leaving note is that it is an investment in time and effort to get things set up and to get the hang of it. But once you do, like Shane's setup is ready to go, it is 45 seconds of kind of scaling your formula, and then that's something that you can keep doing for the duration.
Well, we're gonna go even deeper, but you'll see the recording once we're done.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Francesca.
Thanks, Francesca. We'll see you soon.
Okay, so as I mentioned, this next parameter just really refers to the creativity, and it will default to a temperature of 0, which means it's the least creative, and that's typically what I leave it at. But if you want, you can explicitly put in 0. If you want it to go even higher, you can put in something like 2.
Let's see what 2 does.
All of this is described in the documentation in GPT for Work.
Shane, try 2. Let's see how creative it gets.
And then just try 2. Well, Actually, maybe the highest you can go is 1.
I think it's 1.
Let's see.
I think it's 0 and 1.
Well, it doesn't look all that creative, but the point is, read the documentation,
But it
look
is.
at it.
You know what I mean? It's like statistically, it was way more creative than 0.
Yeah. But just as importantly, I would say actually more importantly, is the model that you're using. And that's the final parameter, which you can see I've got included in quotes. And as I mentioned, when it comes to writing any sort of text that even remotely approximates human sounding text, we do prefer Claude 3. This is a paid account. You're going to need to pay $20 a month to use this. But as we've said over and over again, we use these tools so often that $20 a month is really kind of minuscule compared to the benefit. You can use this with a free GPT account, I believe. And there are a number of different models that you can use instead of Claude 3 Opus. And if you're interested in seeing what those are, again, that's in the documentation for GPT for Work. They list out all the different models that they support. But usually I'm using either Claude 3 Opus, which you can see here, or GPT-4. The cost of using these is different though, right? So if you're asking for a relatively, if you're doing something relatively simple, that doesn't require, really a lot of complicated thought on behalf of the agent, you may want to think about using a cheaper model, something like GPT 3.5 Turbo. If accuracy really is the name of the game, then, I recommend paying a little extra to use, some of these more advanced models.
Yeah, I mean, some of the strategies are like you can use the free one to kind of get everything set up, and it's kind of free, and then when you're ready to go, you can try a different model and get more accurate. But that's like advanced stuff. But I got a question for you. I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to write formulas. They're just not formula writers. They don't come from the investment banking or the data science world, and they might know how to sum a column up or something like that, but to do something fancy like rank these things, I think you have that.
Yeah, we'll get to that very soon. But I just wanted to orient people to some of the other stuff very quickly that's on this page. There are a range of different functions that you can use through GPT for Work. And essentially what they do is allow you to forego the process of having to write these detailed prompts, because many of these other types of prompts are baked into these functions, right? So I would just encourage people to look at these functions because the prompt is already behind the scenes written into the function itself. So just go here. I definitely encourage you to, at least experiment with this tool and then look through what a lot of these different ones can do. We'll show you one in a second. But before I do that, I wanted to point out, on the topic of models, you can see we're missing data here, right? And if you've never used Perplexity, it is an AI-enabled web browser and chat agent, and it's a great tool. I will just show people quickly what Perplexity even is. Again, it's really just an AI-enabled web browser, but the reason I'm showing it is because they actually have a model. GPT for Work actually supports the use of this model in your spreadsheet, which means that you can do a web search directly in your spreadsheet. So that model is here. It's called the Sonar Small Online model.
Let's try it.
I'm going to go back here. And I've got my prompt saved. And I don't have a description here, but I want one. So all I'm going to do is enter this prompt. I say, provide me with a 100 to 200 character description of this book. And I'm going to reference both the book title and the author. And then, like I said, I've got the model specified here, which is from Perplexity. I'm going to hit enter. And hopefully what this is going to do is search the web for this book and author and come back with the description. And there you go. right? No, this is really powerful, right? Like you'd have to go back and do this web search yourself previously, or even just ignore this data altogether because you didn't have it, right? But now you can actually bring the power of that web search directly in your spreadsheet, which I think is
Yeah.
really
How
cool.
many, like, Shane, this is like, there's 10 million people doing this right now. Like, they're not doing what you just did, but like, they're like, oh, I got to find something on the web. So they got another tab open. They're searching the web, going to Wikipedia, blah, 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 highlighting, copying.
Or they're going to Upwork and they're having a cheap team overseas go out and manually do this, right?
Yeah.
So we just condensed, what could be hours or days or weeks of work really in.
Yeah. So again, you might not want to do this yourself. You may want to actually hire folks like us, but I mean, it's like the idea is that you can, if you're in a bind, do this, and you should know about this, or you should know if you're running a team, you're an executive running a team, you should know this is possible. That, like, you may not want to get this dirty, but that's okay. But now you know what's possible, and you can get like your team to be way more efficient. And again, that's why we're trying to share this with you, because we're trying to get you super powered, and this is coming. And the way we like to think about it is like, maybe you don't want to do this, but maybe someone else in your company is doing this and they're going to be 10 times more efficient than you are, or your competitor is going to become 100x more proficient or efficient. So, we think the writing's on the wall because we're doing this all day long and we know we're faster than most other people.
Okay, so
What'd you get?
Let's jump to the next steps in this. The one thing I will say,
that's pretty magical.
It truly
right?
is. So one other note on this is that this is a usage-based pricing model that you're using both with the API key, which again you're going to need to go to. If you want to have access to these paid models, you're going to need to go to either OpenAI, get an API key, or Anthropic, do the same. Take that API key, take it back to GPT for work so that it knows how to charge you. But you're also getting charged on a usage basis by GPT for work. And the reason why I bring that up is because you just got to think through, your budget when you're working, especially across a large amount of data. Again, I can't stress enough like how worth it I think it is, because you'd spend that money otherwise on a team or even your own time to do all this, which does add up. But the other reason I mention that is because these are still live formulas, right? So if you were to walk away from this spreadsheet for any meaningful amount of time, or if you were to do something like add in a column, all of those formulas are going to refresh, meaning you're going to incur that cost again, right? So
but it's not like a huge cost.
Not a huge
it's
cost,
not like hundreds of dollars. This is like
It
dollars.
is, but if you are working over thousands and thousands of rows, it does add up, right? So what I recommend is when you're happy with your results, you turn these formulas into hard-coded values, and you can do that in a couple different ways. You can either do that through the GPT for work extension. So I'm going to open it up. I've got this column highlighted, and you are basically, there's a very simple command in here that allows you to just hard code these. Sometimes it takes a while. So I'm going to just click on replace formulas in selection, and it will turn all these formulas just into the hard coded text, which again, definitely keep this in mind because you don't want them to continue to refresh and incur those costs. But you could just as easily have copied them all and then pasted them back into those values. Okay, so let's jump to this. There's several other steps. One other thing I wanted to show you, which is another function available through GPT for work, is the some of the more purpose-built functions they've got. So our goal is to put these into categories, right? Now, to do this would take a lot of time as well, because you'd have to read the descriptions, decide what categories you even want, and then go back and assign those categories to the book based on the description. So I'm going to use a couple different tools in order to do this. It's very easy to do. But the first thing I want to do is just come up with those categories, to begin with, right? So what I'm going to do is take this entire column of text Actually, first I'm going to get the prompt I want to use. And in order to do this, we're going to go back to ChatGPT. You could just as easily use Claude. And then I'm going to say,
or Copilot, Microsoft's Copilot.
yeah, exactly. So I've got my prompt ready to go. I'm going to paste it in here. And basically what I'm saying is I would like to organize my list of books into categories based on their descriptions. Your task is to review the descriptions that I'm going to provide and then come up with those categories for me. And I give it examples again. I say, acceptable categories might include philosophy, engineering, and so forth. I say, please take your time. That's another little hack that, I found to actually work well, is to tell the agent to take its time and think through the process thoroughly. But I say, take your time, review the descriptions, and then provide me with a table with the first column containing the category, the second column containing a description, and then the third column containing an estimate of what proportion of my descriptions fit within that category. And the reason I do that is because I want to know if it's going to come up with categories, how appropriate are they? Like, what proportion of the data fits in any one of those categories? Okay, so then I say, here are the descriptions. And so I'm going to go back to our book table. I'm going to take our new descriptions. I'm just going to copy all of them. And I'm going to paste it in with my prompt. So what ChatGPT is doing now is reading through those descriptions, and it's going to come up with a list of categories that it thinks might be appropriate. You see here, threw off an error message, but I often find that if you just regenerate, maybe I allowed the session to take too long. So I'm just going to refresh. And there you go, right? So it gave me back a table, technology and society, geopolitics, business and economics, ethical, and you can see here. And then it even gave me a proportion. Now, if you were doing the same exact workflow and it gave you back, categories where, one of them is like 1%, that may tell you maybe it's not a very relevant category. But I've got the category, I've got the description. So
that's great. That's super. Again, like I it's got to be. People have to realize that that's pretty magical, and it's done now.
Yeah. So here's the thing: every time you prompt these, it may come back with a different response. In fact, it will come back with a different response. But at some level, this is always going to be a little subjective, and I don't think the goal is perfection. It's really what is good enough for your workflow. And again, you're going to need to spend some time just finessing the results you get back, but it's a great starting point, at least for exercises like this. And I'm not going to use these categories because just for the sake of expediency, I've already got some loaded into our spreadsheet from a previous time that I went through this workflow. But what you want to do is take these categories and descriptions, and then you're going to paste them back into some place in your spreadsheet, which is necessary for the next step I'm going to show you. And that is using another function from GPT for work called the tag function. And basically what this function is doing is it allows you to reference some source data, which in our case is the description, and then provide a table, which is the tags you want, and then examples of those tags. Right. And that's exactly what we just got back from ChatGPT. So the first time I did this, these are the categories it came back with: business and economics, education, ethics, and technology. Not too dissimilar from the last list we were just looking at. And then I've got the definitions here. Right. So this table is going to be what that function that I mentioned directly references. And I'll show you what that means in action right here. Before I do that, I'm going to get the prompt. No, that's here. So here's our prompt. I'm going to go back to books, and then I'm going to go to the first place we want to assign this. And the Again, this is all in the documentation for GPT for work, but you can see the starting point of this formula is slightly different. Now it's instead of GPT, it's GPT tag. And I'm going to reference first the description, and then I'm going to reference the tag. In fact, I'll just do this live so people can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to reference this first. I'm going to go back to our category table. I'm going to reference the tags first. I'm going to lock these in so I can drag the formula. Then you've got to reference the tags and the examples. Again, all of which I got from ChatGPT. And then I'm going to lock this also. This parameter here is called...
For some of the folks that don't know what lock means, you might want to, since you're getting so detailed.
So what we want to do is take this formula and drag it over our entire spreadsheet. And, if I didn't do what I just did, then as I drag the formula down on our other sheet, it's also going to drag these references down on this sheet. And if I do that, it's going to be referencing blank cells. When I say lock the formula, you're basically making sure that no matter how many cells I drag this formula down on the other tab, it will always reference this set of cells on this tab.
And the operator to lock is?
So you can use, it's usually the F4 function. On a Mac, it's function F4. On a PC, it's just F4.
Right, and what it's doing is it's putting a dollar sign in front of your column name.
I won't get into all the specifics on this. I would recommend people just look up what that means. But we've locked both the rows and the columns. So if you just toggle through that F4 button, you can lock, just the rows or just the columns. So the next parameter here is what is called top K. And in plain English, all that means is how many tags do you want back, right? So I've said for every book, I want 3 tags back from this list. Which is, and you could say 1, right? If I only want to assign 1 tag, in fact, that's what I'll do. I'll just say, I just want 1 tag per book. And then I reference, of course, our model. I'm going to hit enter.
Yep.
And the agent is going to look at this description and then assign 1 tag from our list. And then it just did that.
There you go. Let's add 4.
Okay, so for the next, let's do 4.
This is how easy it is. You just go back and change it to 4 and presto.
Now you could have done this manually. You could have wrote out your own prompt with just the GPT formula and say, hey, I've got these four tags and I want you to assign this book to one of those 4 tags. But I just find this particular function, which again is over here, somewhere here, to be a lot easier. And it actually results in more accurate output.
Let's go look at what the 4 look like.
Okay, here you go.
So magically, it came up with the same technical, ethics and society, business, and economics. Those seem pretty good. Those match what Ethan's book's about. So now you could drag that and assume that you could just get 4 on all of them.
Yeah. Now, again, this is where you just got to use a little bit of common sense. If you've only got a small list and only 4 categories, you probably don't want to use 4. But you can see where if you've got a huge data set and maybe 15 different categories, you have to think about what's appropriate. Do I assign 2 or 3 style, or 4 or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's style. But the what you're demonstrating is like it's actually doing the job.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and these are all very related books. They're all on our artificial intelligence. A lot of them talk about things, like societal implications. So it shouldn't be a surprise that they all, have to do with these tags.
Right.
If I had a database of 1,000 different books, this would look very different. Okay, so we're getting to the end of this tutorial, which is finally creating this ranking algorithm. And again,
okay, so the ranking, like if you're just an average, Excel user or Google Sheets user, writing a ranking algorithm is probably harder than you think, and you might opt out not doing it, or you might have to ask someone else on another team to help you do it. But we're going to show you how we would do
and
it
we'll give
using
you just
GPT.
a very, very high level rundown. We won't go into all the specifics. But before I do that, I want to just lock these values in. This time I'm just going to copy them all and paste them in as values so they don't refresh. And notice over here in this first column A, I've got rank. Well, we don't know what the rank is yet, but when we're done, this rank will automatically appear for us.
Right, and we're ranking based on data that we got. Could be whatever data you have, like, customers like this more, customers don't like this. Like, you might have your own sort of data, but you just want to get a quick rank.
And you may
don't
not even want to do a rank.
sum.
It could be something else, right?
Yeah.
But that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Like use these tools to do whatever it is you're trying to do. In our case, we want to come up with a simple algorithm that looks at all the ratings, the number of ratings, the number of reviews, the average rating of these or the rating of these books. We also want it to factor in recency, right? So I've got the date of publication for all these books. And finally, we wanted to look at whether the book was mentioned on, any bestseller lists. And you can see some are and some are not. To come up with an algorithm like this, again, even if you're a master at, spreadsheets, it might take a while. So I'm going to go back to our initial set of steps.
Well, yeah, and even if you're a master at it, like, why not? You just use it. Like, why not use it? Like, why not use AI to help you do it?
Well,
That's
the thing is,
like,
even if you are, this will get you probably 70, 80, 90% of the way. And then your job is really just to go back over and audit what you've gotten back. So it's a huge,
Let's
huge
see the
time
magic.
saver. Okay, so I've got this prompt written in a separate document because it's kind of long and it wouldn't fit into a comment in a cell. But I'm going to take this entire prompt, which I will review in a sec. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, which again, you could use Claude or something else if you wanted. And I say, your final task is to help me come up with an algorithm which will help me rank order this list of books, right? So the agent already knows we've been working with this book list for a while now, right? So it's got a lot of context already. I don't have to go back and tell it again what I'm doing. I say, please come up.
I noticed that you have some column names in there. Is that you obviously have to know your column names? You can't put in, random.
Well,
column
this really
names
gets
here.
at, again, really providing very specific detail to the agent, right? So I say, come up with a formula that references the characteristics below, right? So I'm telling it qualitatively, what is it? It's an Amazon rating out of 5 stars. I tell it where specifically in my spreadsheet it is. Column J, containing a numerical value. Amazon reviews, it's the number of reviews, and it's column K, again, containing a numerical value. I do the same thing for all the other columns that I want it to factor into the formula. Publication date, I say, again, I tell it what column it's in, and I say, in our case, I want a higher weight to be given to the more recent books. Your priority, your project may be totally different, but tell it what you want. And then I say notable mentions. And the point here is so I say the algorithm should only take into account whether there is text here or not. So it's binary, right? You may want to specify something else, like the longer the text is, or the more comma separated values there is. It just depends on your workflow. And then I say your task is to come up with a control panel, right? So I'm saying, not only do I want the formula, but I want you to create a table for me that formula can reference. And this is also part of the reason why I specified which columns each of these other variables are in, because I want it to do as much of the work as possible for me. So ideally, I get back what I say is an output that not only includes that control panel, but also a formula that I can just take and copy and paste directly in the cell, and it'll immediately work.
Let's try it.
Okay, so I've already done this before, so I'm just going to paste it in, and you can always pause the video and see what the results are. But just for the sake of efficiency,
Well, on that note, you could pause the video and watch it, but we're also easily found at coai.co, which is our web address, and jump in and start talking to us. Like we're basically trying to get you guys, the listeners and the viewers, like to like be able to do this yourself. And if you don't want to do it yourself, we could certainly talk about how we could help you or our community can help you. But let's see what comes up here.
First, you'll note that it gave me back exactly what I asked for. It gave me back a table like I was looking for. And I'll explain to you why we wanted that in a second. And then it gave me back the formula, right? So like I said, I've already got this loaded into our spreadsheet. Once again, every time you have these conversations, the results may be different, right? But again, this is really getting you that, the first 80% of the way there.
We're trying to get you the edge. So do you paste it in
the
control panel tab?
These are the results from a different session that I used with the same prompt, and
so you're gonna blow that away?
No, I'm gonna keep them here because I've already gone through this workflow. The logic is more or less the same, but conceptually, what this is referring to is all of the, parameters and weights that we're going to use in our formula, right? So we've got a weight that we want to assign to the ratings, the reviews, the published date, the base year. All this means is this is the current year that we want to be factored into the algorithm so that it knows whether to penalize or reward a book for being more or less recent. And the formula, it's quite simple math, which I won't totally get into because you can always pause the video, like I said, and investigate it.
Yeah, no one wants math right now. There's no math on this test.
Let's see if actually, I know where it is. Okay, so the formula that I have, maybe I don't have it here. That's fine. So I'm going to take this formula. It may not work since my comment is gone. You just make sure. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is just this concept of multimodality, right? So one of the things that I did when I first went through this workflow is not only paste in this prompt, but I actually took a screenshot of my actual table. Because again, I want it to give me back results that I can just easily copy and paste. So I took a screenshot of this with my prompt, and I included this as context. So all you do is paste in that image and say something like, here is a screenshot. Here's a screenshot of the tab where I want your weights to go and what I want the formula to reference. And you can paste the image in, and this just gives it a little more specificity as far as like how it writes the formula and how it references that formula back to these weights. Okay, so we'll see this. We're doing this on the fly now, so hopefully it works. I'm going to take these weights and values. I'm just going to paste them in here. And that's why I wanted to provide that screenshot, because now it knows what order do I want it in, right? So you can just take it, copy it, paste it.
Yeah, what's cool is you're making the AI see.
Exactly.
It now has vision. It's seeing what you're seeing, and it's helping you do your job.
And by the way, so this is another reason why I recommend the paid account with ChatGPT, because I believe, at least, very recently, you just didn't get this multimodal capability. In other words, the ability to use things like machine vision, pasting in screenshots with the free version.
Yeah, more and more, the more the AI can see and it's listening to you type, it's like the more it can be helpful. So, that's why Shane's sort of like actually demonstrating that, like, he's pasting in a photo and you're essentially saying, do this. It's like, it makes it more powerful.
So now I've got the formula. It knows the cells, the rows and the columns that I want to reference with that formula because I pasted in the screenshot. I'm going to take the formula. I'm going to paste it in here. May look a little.
I mean, look how hairy that formula is. That you don't want to write that. Let the computer write it for you.
Let's see. Let's see what's going on here. Oh wait, I think I know. So we want to say.
So this is now Shane's going back to the AI, and he's just simply saying, "Hey, I need you to do it this way."
It may have thought that I wanted a
AI
Microsoft
will do it.
Excel formula, so I'm saying that I'm working in a Google Sheet. I think the references just weren't active because of the quotation, the type of quotation marks it was using. But who knows? We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to take the formula. I'm going to paste it in. Oh, still not working.
It's telling you some instructions. Make sure you're on the Books tab.
Okay, so now we've got
There
a
you
ranking,
go.
right? So
Bravo.
I'm going to drag this down.
That's pretty cool.
Now something.
So look at that.
Yeah. So something is. Look, we've said before, you're going to want to go back and sanity check this, right? But the fact that it got you this far, I think, has already saved a lot of time. And
well, I mean, yes and no, right? It's like if you don't even understand any of that formula, because to someone it might be like complete gibberish, but you know, like providing that you can kind of get this understanding, you can kind of massage this into a ranking. So and if you don't like what you've got, you can keep going back, just like how Shane did. He went back to GPT and said, "No, I need this," or like, "This doesn't seem right."
Yeah, and like I said, we're not going to walk through all of the elements of the formula. The point is really just to grok the workflow and the process and how we're using this. Now, I could just as easily go back and say, hey, look, I want you to come up with a ranking algorithm that uses more of a log scale, right? And factors in the relative ranking for all the books, relative to each other. And just keep working with it to get back different formulas and experiment with them and see what you like the best, right? It's not a single shot, one and done type process. So we've got this.
It's more of a conversation.
We've got the scores in
more
here.
Of a conversation.
The final step here would be, and again, I can tell already that these are not, entirely correct. And there's a number of different ways that you could use a different, algorithm.
Yeah.
And then we've got a simple formula over here that looks at the score of one book and measures it against the scores of all the other books. Which again, you could easily just go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I forgot the ranking formula. What is it? Give it to me. Here's the setup of my spreadsheet. Give me the formula back." But I've got it pasted in here, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna highlight this whole table. I'm gonna sort it based on. We've got a header row. I'm going to sort it based on the rank, and I believe we want it to be one first. Oh. There we go. And now we're sorted.
There you go.
We're rank ordered.
So with AI, we basically added the category. We deduped. We added categories. We added tags. We took all the data that was available to us, and we ordered it using a somewhat smart algorithm, and that's all done. We did that in 40 minutes.
The reality is, you could have done this in probably about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, but we're in this video session, but if you just weren't interrupted and you just sat down and did this, it's done. And this might have taken you 2 days. And if you had, but a lot of times you're not dealing with 20 rows. We're dealing with data that's 10,000 rows. You might have 900 customer success comments that are have 30 columns, and you want to move through it. 900 columns could take you or your team, a week to get done, because you got other stuff to do. So this solves a lot of problems. The whole idea here for us is at CoAI and this podcast, the Future Proof podcast, is saying like, this is what's happening today. Like you could do this today. Learning how to use these tools today is going to make you super powered. And if you're an executive and you're watching this, like you want your team to be more efficient, these are the kinds of tools you want them to learn. And this is what we're trying to get people to understand, because we're actually really worried. I mean, our immediate concern when we started this whole endeavor was like, hey, it's AI is not going to replace your job. It's other teams that know how to use AI that are going to replace your job, because they're just going to be that much more efficient. And we want you, our brothers, sisters, dads, and moms, we want you to become superpowered. So you're one of the people that are like, kicking ass at your job versus getting kicked out. And so a lot of work in business is done in spreadsheets.
And if you've got questions,
we want you to learn this stuff.
Some of the finer points of what we walked through, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got feedback on what you'd like to see next, I know we're going to tee up another similar type of tutorial more on the creative side, but we use these tools for pretty much everything we do nowadays. It's not just limited to a spreadsheet. It's not just limited to creating images. So we look forward to doing more. And like I said, if you've got questions, definitely reach out. We'll post some of these resources in the show notes.
In the comments.
And definitely go check out GPT for Work. I mean, they're a great team, very thoughtful, and it's just a really cool product.
Yes, we'll answer your questions in comments. We will also put all of this for download. We can download, links to the data that Shane was showing. And look forward to chatting with you guys in comments. That's all I got. What are you done, Shane? Good? I
think we're good. We'll be launching CoAI very soon. It's going to be available at getcoai.com. That's getcoai.com. And we look forward to doing more of these.
Yep. Right on. Good job. Good day, everybody.